Parshas Chaya Sarah can be dubbed a textual farce. What do I mean, a textual farce or a satire? There's so many psukim, and it's so, as we say in Yiddish, ausgequetscht, about nothing. What happens of dramatic nature in Parshas Chaya Sarah? Mamish nothing. And certainly in the wake, in the aftermath of Lech Lecha and Vayera, the drama, the supernatural personalities, the Malachim, the Har Maria, the Gilush Shechina, the Chalom, the Bris Milah, the name changes. Everything about Lech Lecha and Vayera is dramatic and epic and fits the style and the content, fit the personalities of Avram Avinu and the birth of Am Yisrael. Everything about Chaya Sarah is very prosaic and mundane and, so to speak, useless. What happens? Very pedestrian activities. Avram buys some land and Yitzchak has a shidduch. And those events could have been described in shorthand. It could have taken 3 psukim to describe those events. Now, did the negotiations take place? Of course they did, but the Torah doesn't record everything that took place. The Torah records issues of interest. So why is Chaya Sarah so outsized and elongated in an area that it could have just been very condensed and contracted? So Chazal spoke about this already. Chazal's famous statement, Yafa sichas and shalav de'avos mitaras and shalbanim. Chazal are directing us to, if you really want to take the true measure of a person, look at the people in their surroundings, the people that are impacted by them. So if you really want to know who someone is, look at their children or look at their servants. So to get the full measure of Avram, you have to take a look at his evet and how he behaves and the decorum and the sensitivity, and very often that's a true measure of someone. Other reasons Chaya Sarah is important, because Avram's life can't be filled out until he's seen as a family person, not just the hero standing at Har Moriah. We all struggle as people to find that balance between our missions in life and our careers and our desire to influence Am Yisrael, to change the world. Rav Amital, as many of you also had the schus to learn by Rav Amital, to learn with people, learn with Rav Amital, who is a master of counterintuition. He had this real knack of being able to turn an idea on a swivel, see it from a different perspective, and develop fresh meaning. And we used to call it actually Rav Yoel Amital, his son from Shalavim, told me, he coined the phrase, Rav Amital was fantastic at Ibcha Mistavra, being able to see things. So there was a story once that in Give Up Mordechai, the Mormons wanted to open a missionary. You ever hear this story? They wanted to start missionaries. Now in Eretz Yisrael it's actually illegal to missionarize Jews. It's illegal. But you're allowed to missionarize Arabs. It's an interesting law. No, it's an interesting law, but they were stretching the law. So there was a whole protest in the community in Give Up Mordechai. And they showed up at Rav Amital's door, because he was the unspoken leader of the community, signed the protest against the missionary opening up in Give Up Mordechai. Rav Amital refused. Get out of the house, he said. So Rav Yoel told me, Rav Yoel's a Rebbe in Shalavim, he told me that he went over to his father afterwards and said, Abba, why don't you want to sign it? It's going to be a missionary. They're going to proselytize. They're going to preach Christianity. They can convert Jews. So Rav Amital evidently told his son, he says, these missionaries, they're going to open somewhere. If not in Give Up Mordechai, it's going to be in Petach Tikva. If not in Petach Tikva, it's going to be in Haifa. Let them open and Give Up Mordechai right near the Chevron Yeshiva. The Chevron guys will eat them for breakfast the last 2 weeks. And Fartik. Kachaya. They open and Give Up Mordechai. The Chevroners, those of you who know Yeshiva's Chevron, the nickname for Chevron Yeshiva Bachrim are the Sharks. They bit them to pieces. Within 3 weeks, no longer any missionaries. So Rav Amital once told us, in his unique capacity to see things from an inverse angle, he says, you know how people say, at first I tried to change the world, and then when that became too difficult, I just focused on changing my family. And when that became too difficult, I just drew myself inward and focused on changing myself. So Rav Amital would say, shtayat, 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 to just wipe away these stale, stereotyped, so to speak, ossified formulas. He said, that's not the way it really happens. Shtayat, shtayat. He says, first, people try to change themselves. When that's too hard, they try to change their family. When that's too hard, they try to change the world. That's the emes, right? Some people are world beaters. They're out there shaping society, shaping policy, and then unfortunately their children, their family, their wives are neglected, are And of course, that comes to a head right at the juncture between Vayera and Chaya Sarah. Vayavo Avraham Lisbod L'Sarah V'Liv Kota. So what do Chazal say? Me'echen ba. So you know it matters. Where was Avram when Sarah died? He was at the Akedah. So that's a distillation of the fact you can't be two places at once. You're either at Har Moriah shaping history, or you're with your wife at her side when she's dying, caressing her. And you can't be both. You can't be at both places. It's not Avram's fault that he has to come posthumously after Sarah has died already, but the point of Chaya Sarah is that he actually does come and tries to compensate for, or at least round out his career. But I think there's a deeper message to Chaya Sarah, and obviously the context doesn't allow it, but if you look at Chaya Sarah, essentially the spine of Chaya Sarah is constructed of two parallel stories. And there are a lot of stylistic parallels as well as narrative parallels. Basically, there are two stories that dominate Chaya Sarah. Avraham soliciting land from Bnei Ches, and Eved Avraham, or Eved Ish, soliciting a wife from Besuel and Lavan. Those are the two storylines. And the stories are basically negotiations. A negotiation for a land, negotiation for a wife. And if you look carefully at the two stories, there are a lot of similarities. Each one, in each case, someone has to travel. Avraham has to travel, Vayavo Avraham, and the Ish has to travel to Ram Naraim. Avraham bows twice to the people of Ches. The Eved bows twice to Lavan, once to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then once to Lavan or Besuel when he comes in. There's exchange of money in the case of Avraham. There's exchange of jewelry in the case of the Eved Avraham. There are a lot of parallel to the stories. There's one difference. If you look at the negotiations in the end of the parsha, for Rivka, so to speak, the negotiations are swimming. They move swimmingly. Everything is perfect. Everything is smooth. Chazal fill in the undercurrent. Saul tried to poison the Eved, and they didn't really want to. But if you just look at the text, everyone is falling over themselves to accommodate the shidduch. And they give Rivka the choice, and Rivka announces she wants to go as quickly as possible, and they bless her, and they dispatch her, they welcome this Eved, he's embraced, he's showered with love and empathy. Basically, the second part of Chaya Sarah is a smooth, successful attempt to bring Rivka back into the fold. If you look at the negotiations in the beginning of the parsha, they're very, very strenuous. They're very challenging. Well, we'll see. I'll introduce you to Ephron, and then he meets Ephron, and there's a lot of discussion. How much money will be paid? You sense resistance. You sense duplicity. You sense, even in the text, lack of enthusiasm, lack of eagerness to proceed with these negotiations. So everything about these stories suggests similarity, except for how smoothly they run. Second negotiations are smooth and successful. First negotiations are very stunted, very adversarial, very contentious. Why? Avraham Avinu has two missions. A Jew has two missions. His mission in life, he's selected as HaKadosh Baruch Hu's people to revolutionize world consciousness by introducing two brave ideas into the human discourse, into the human vernacular. Monotheism and morality. The world worshipped planets, animals, seasons, molten images, physical apparitions, and Avram introduced a brave concept that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't be seen, can't be described, can't be sculpted, can't even be imagined. The basic tenets of monotheism. And of course, as Rav Kook said, the heroism of the Akedah was, after finally convincing the world of a God you couldn't see, they still doubted him. Okay, you can believe conceptually in such a God, but can you feel passionate about something you can't see? And the Akedah debunked that premise. Akedah reinforced the notion not only can you believe theologically in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you can't describe or fathom, but you can even summon emotions about an object that your eyes can't visualize and that your mind can't conceive. So Avram introduces monotheism into the world, and Baruch Hashem, that's the first revolution that the Jewish people have launched, and that Baruch Hashem has succeeded. We don't view, theologically, or even historically, Islam or Christianity as failures. Very famous sefer of the Ramban in Barcelona during the 13th century, after the kangaroo trial launched by Pablo Cristiani, who squealed on him to the king. The Jews were very depressed because the jury, of course, was predetermined against Judaism. The Ramban writes a sefer called Taras Hashem Tamima, in which he tries to rejuvenate the depressed and disconsolate spirit of the Jews, and he reminds them, as frustrating as Islam or Christianity may be to us historically by torturing and persecuting the Jewish people, theologically, these are religions that replaced paganism, lifted ideas from Tanakh, corrupted them a bit, but spread and disseminated monotheism to areas that Jews don't have time to travel to. We don't have time to go to Malaysia and convert paganists into Muslims. Let the Muslims do it, or to monotheists. We don't have time to go to South America and convert the Mayans into monotheists. So the Christians did it for us. So by and large, from a purely theological standpoint, Christianity and Islam, despite the corruptions, despite the persecutions of Judaism, these were outgrowths, these were branches of monotheism, and Baruch Hashem, they've re-landscaped the world of monotheism. The second brave message of Avraham Avinu, which is of course tethered to monotheism, is morality. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mechako Chaim B'Chesed, Mechayim Eisim B'Rachamim Rabim, he's Rachamim, Chesed, Shalom. Man spent close to 2,000 years envisioning a God of anger, a God of blood, a God of vengeance, a God of punishment, because quite frankly, that's all they saw. They saw Adam being expelled from Gan Eden. They saw Cain being condemned to wander the earth. They saw Migdal Bavel, Dar HaFlaga, the Mabul, and the human mind conceived of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as angry, militant, and hostile. And as much as HaKadosh Baruch Hu tried to dissuade them, men just didn't understand, didn't comprehend. Remember the rainbow of Noach? Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's symbol in Noach a rainbow? Many different interpretations, but the Ramban says, because a rainbow is an inverted bow. So everyone had assumed Hashem was a warrior with a bow facing humanity, flinging arrows. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in Shammai, he would be holding a bow. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, it's not a bow, it's a dome. It's an iron dome. I want to protect you. I want to shield you. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu converts a weapon into a protective shield. Finally, Avram senses moral energy in the world. Avram didn't discover Hashem through science. Avram discovered HaKadosh Baruch Hu through moral energy. Lashon Chazal, Bira Dolekes. Avram saw a city ablaze with life, ablaze with mercy. The world would be 1 centimeter closer to the sun, we'd be incinerated, it'd be the same science. 1 centimeter further from the sun, we'd freeze, science would still be in play. Avram sensed life. Avram sensed chesed. And he craved not just to locate the source of that chesed, but to be an agent of that chesed. He didn't wear two hats. People mistake Avram as wearing two hats, the head of a philosopher and the head of a do-gooder. It was Socrates and Mother Teresa. Not for him. It was one and the same. He understood the chesed of Hashem, and he wanted to try to disseminate and spread chasdei Hashem. These are the two messages that Jews are tasked with providing and telegraphing, broadcasting to an entire world audience. And Baruch Hashem, by and large, the broader community is very receptive to those messages. Everyone understands the Jewish contribution to society, in culture, in medicine, in science, in technology. We're the people of the book. Every country that Jews have resided in, that have embraced them, has surged, has developed, has evolved into a world empire. By and large, in the absence of virulent anti-Semitism, the Jewish message to humanity of monotheism and morality, that message is warmly embraced, warmly championed. If anything, the terror of ISIS just reminds us of how moral our world really is. Because 400 years ago, you know what would happen if someone would decapitate another human being in the street? Nothing. Because it was a daily occurrence. And Baruch Hashem, we live in a world in which we're appalled, which we are aghast when we see these events. And because this is a world of moral sensibility, moral civility. And everyone is willing and excited to embrace that message. But then there's another agenda to the Jewish mission. And that is not just to broadcast a message of monotheism and morality, of science and technology, of human welfare and prosperity, but to live in that land called Israel and establish that as our homeland and to broadcast it from that land. And hopefully, by establishing a monarchy or a theocracy in that land, by ushering in an era of redemption in which the entire world is redeemed and ennobled. And that's not always as warmly embraced. The Jews are welcome to contribute to society. And that's what's happening in Parshas Chaya. When it comes to the Jewish message, and essentially there's not just a shidduch between Yitzchak and Rivka, this is spreading the gospel of Avraham to Mesopotamia, to Iraq, to Iran. The union of families is not just two people eloping and marrying one another, but Avraham's message and Avraham's entourage is now expanding. And to a degree, Lavan is happy to join the clan, is happy to reunite. This is a reunification. The prodigal son returns. Avram had departed. Now Avram's returning, so to speak, and embracing and incorporating his old family, his former family, into the fold. And they will begin, and that's why they sense HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. If you notice, the parsha in Sefer BERESHIS, which has the greatest concentration of Hashem's name, is Parshas Chaya. Chaya, in terms of narrative, not in terms of Parshas BERESHIS, and there are people speaking, both in Chaya and in Parshas Vayeshev. Yosef, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name Shagor B'Peh, and Eved Avram, and they Atayil al favor Rava. They're sensing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. Bo Baruch Hashem. They invite the Eved to come into their home. So this is not just finding a shidduch for Yitzchak. This is essentially broadening Avraham's sweep and incorporating Avraham's message. And they're willing to accept that message. Avraham has succeeded in spreading this revolution across the entire ancient Mesopotamian cradle. The first part of Parshas Chaya is about Avram looking to purchase a parcel of land about the width of this table and about the length of from where I'm sitting to the tangerines. You can't see it on the camera, but it's about 2 feet. How much land does Avram really, really request? His wife has just died. Her body is decomposing. It's a humanitarian cause. Carve out a little parcel of land so this poor old man can bury his rotting wife's body. And the negotiations and the contracts and the lawyers and the details and Akesef, the entire Maseches Kiddushin is derived from Parshas Chaya. It's Maseches Kiddushin. Hasada kach mimeni, hakesed nasam biyadcha, stipulation, pigauni, ger v'toshavar achiyim achem. The fact that the Torah spends so much time describing these negotiations just reminds us of how torturous and how strained it was. Because when Jews want to return to Eretz Yisrael, and when Jews want to establish their presence, even partially, this is the first acquisition of Eretz Yisrael, that isn't as warmly and as enthusiastically accepted. And that's the contrast between these two negotiations. That's why Chaya takes so much time to unfold, to highlight the contrast between how Jews affect the world and how quickly and immediately that's embraced, and yet somehow our desire to broadcast that message from the land of Israel, from our homeland, that meets with much more opposition. And to a degree, that's what we face as Jews. We face it on two fronts, and I think especially for the college boys here, I know not for you, but for your friends, but it's a very important issue. It's a very important issue in terms of the struggle for identity. A lot of people have a hard time with the phrase chosen people, God's people. It sounds in today's world very bigoted, very racist. We're better than others. We're superior than others. Jews have two agendas. We have a universalist agenda and a national agenda. I remember I was once on a plane and someone asked me, Rabbi, what makes Judaism different from any other religion? Every religion has its tradition. Every religion has its value system. Why is Judaism superior? I had a long conversation with him. He was a professor from MIT. He was a Jew, wasn't from. I said, do you know that for every Christian, you have a bullseye in your back? Because his endgame, his messianic endgame, is the conversion of every other person to Christianity or the elimination of that person as an infidel. And do you know that for every Muslim, you have a bullseye in your back? Because their endgame is a conversion of every single person to Islam or their elimination. We have no interest in converting anyone to Judaism. That's not our purpose. That's not our task. We stand for these dual messages of monotheism and morality, and it's our responsibility to live those values with greater commitment and greater commandment and greater regiment to display to our entire world what a life of monotheism and morality is meant to convey, and how noble it is and how dignified it is. We are, as ironic as it sounds, the most universalist religion, because we want to redeem the world on their terms, not on our terms. A Christian wants to redeem you by converting you to Christianity on his terms. A Muslim wants to redeem you by converting you to his theology. I don't want to convert anyone to Judaism. I just want their lives to be ennobled on their terms, and I'm trying to live a life that showcases that experience with greater sensitivity and greater commitment. So a Jew has a universalist tendency, and sometimes today, both in Chutz La'aretz and in Israel, you have people that are becoming so nationalistic and parochial in their agenda that they've lost the universalist agenda. You have people who say, oh, the Goyim, they don't matter, they're just straw figures, 5 billion people have no purpose in this world. Here in America, it takes on one form in certain Haredi circles or other circles where the roles of Gentiles are dismissed. In Eretz Yisrael, because of nationalism and because of our desire to settle our land, and that universalist agenda has to be maintained. On the other hand, you've got so many Jews today that are so universalist and so humanist that then Jewish identity is completely atrophied. It's hard to see their sense of pride of being a Jew. And the challenge of a Jew is to be able to mesh those two identities, but not just to create a hybrid, but to sense their inner synchronicity. Namely, as follows. Let me pose the following question to you. Let's say you knew that over the next 24 hours, you had the following choice. You could either solve cancer. 24 hours in the laboratory, you could solve cancer. I'm fine. Laboratory thing. You could solve cancer. Or, for the next 24 hours, you could settle a hilltop in Israel. What would you choose?
It should be still out here. Right? Settle with hilltop.
Now, people will be shocked at that answer. I could relieve suffering for hundreds of millions of people, and then you're acting selfish and nationalistic by settling a hilltop. But why should I attempt to improve the human condition through human convention when I could advance Jewish redemption and invite HaKadosh Baruch Hu to intervene in this world and repair the world in ways that far supersede human capacity? When Mashiach comes, there will be no cancer, no illness, no sickness. It would be selfish of me to go to the laboratory, because it would be a flawed, partial solution rather than a divine, complete solution. Now, of course, the answer is I'd also go into the laboratory, because we have to act pragmatically and practically. But you hear the question, which means that when you settle a hilltop in Israel, you're acting universalist, not nationalist. Your methodology is nationalist, but your goal is universalist, because for a Jew to redeem himself and his people is to redeem a world, and not on our terms, but to redeem them in ways that they don't understand or not yet willing to appreciate. And it's that struggle to unify these two ideas or these two themes. And I know for people in the workforce, on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we spend 24 hours with Jews, with frum Jews, going to shiur and davening. And then it's Monday, and I work with Jews, but you're in the office and you're working with your coworkers. All of a sudden, there's a different part of you that comes out, that part of you that naturally seeks common ground with non-Jews. And are you able to synthesize those two identities? And able to feel your pride as a Jew and express your Jewish identity, but realize that Jewish identity is the fulfillment of a universalist goal. And that's a question of argument I think a lot of college people struggle with, a lot of college-age adults struggle, a lot of adults struggle with. And it's that paradox, not really a paradox, but it's that dichotomy that's on display in Chaya. And to a degree, that's really what's coming to a head in Eretz Yisrael now. It's no incident, it's not coincidental that the violence has erupted around Rabbi. It just reminds us that this isn't a political skirmish. This is because as much as Yerushalayim is our city, and Yerushalayim is Beis HaMikdash and Shara Shamayim, it's also Yefei, Nof, Misos, Kol Haaretz. It's the beautiful land that the entire world celebrates. The Gemara says in Yoma, according to one day in the Gemara of Yoma, every single human being was created from Yerushalayim. Mitzion, Michlal Yofi. And people sense that. And that's why they want a part of Yerushalayim. The very interesting Yerushalmi and Meiser Sheni. If you can't schlep all your fruit to Yerushalayim, so you're poded the fruit. So if you live in Petach Tikva, and you have an entire truckload of, let's say, Rimonim, so instead of schlepping all the Rimonim to Yerushalayim, you are poded, you take the money to Yerushalayim, and you buy food in Yerushalayim and eat it in Yerushalayim. What type of currency can you use to be poded Meiser Sheni? Does it have to be Jewish currency? So the Shalmi, the Meiser Sheni says, you can use any currency because all currencies are accepted in Yerushalayim. Because Yerushalayim is an international town. It's meant to be Yifei, Nof, Misos, Kol Haaretz. And that's why there's such a desperate struggle over Yerushalayim. Subconsciously, every single nation knows that Yerushalayim is both the origin of human experience and ultimately the terminus of human experience. And everyone wants a part of that. And not only does everyone want a part of that, we want everyone to want a part of that because that's our mission. We want everyone to be drawn to Yerushalayim. That's our nevuah. But peacefully and following our lead, Ki Mitzion Tetzei Torah, V'dvar Hashem Yerushalayim. If you know in Shir HaShirim, it's very interesting in Shir HaShirim. So there are many different personalities in Shir HaShirim. There's, of course, the male, the female, but like any good play, like any Greek play, there are these strange people that ascend the stage at different intermittent phases of the story. And they are the Benos Yerushalayim. Mishpat Yaschem, Benos Yerushalayim, Benot Yerushalayim. You going to share about this?
No, the battery. No.
So, who are Benot Yerushalayim? So Chazal tell us the Benot Yerushalayim in Shir HaShirim, they're the nations of the world, Umos HaOlam. Why are the Umos HaOlam referred to as Benot Yerushalayim, the daughters of Yerushalayim? Why is that the metaphor? Why is that the image? So the answer is, the word Bas has two connotations in Tanakh. Bat, it means the daughter, but sometimes it means an affiliate. Just like a daughter is an affiliate of a family. And very often it means an affiliate in the context of a suburb. So Thornhill would be called Bas Taranto. Or Hamilton would be called Bas Taranto. Because Taranto is a metropolis and Hamilton is a suburb. So in the famous wars in Parshat Chukat between Moab and Sichon, Melech HaAmori lives in a town called Cheshbon. That's the large metropolis that Sichon inhabits. And he conquers Cheshbon uvenosea. Doesn't mean he conquers females. He conquers all the outlying cities surrounding the great city of Cheshbon. Cheshbon uvenosea. So Chazal say, you know why the Umos HaOlam are called Benos Yerushalayim? Because one day Yerushalayim will be the center of the world. And every other city will just be a suburb of Yerushalayim. There will be Benos Yerushalayim. Toronto will be a suburb. New York will be a suburb. Beijing will be a suburb. Moscow will be a suburb. Everything will be a suburb, and everyone knows it subconsciously. So everyone wants to be in Yerushalayim. Did anyone hear of a Parshas HaShavua, Parshas Vayechi? Bechor Shara Hadar Lo, V'kaneim Kanav, V'hem Minigen Agach Yachtav. I'm sorry, Zotz HaBracha, excuse me. V'hem Minigen Agach Yachtav, Avsei Aretz. Yosef will gore and conquer Avsei Aretz. He's not going to gore and conquer Avsei Aretz. He's going to gore and conquer Eretz Yisrael. We have no interest in conquering Britain or Peru or... What does it mean, Avsei Aretz? So Chazal tell us that Israel is called Avsei Aretz. Why is Israel called Avsei Aretz? So the Medrash says because in those days there was not one single king in the entire ancient world that didn't want a toehold in Israel. They all vied to have So Israel became Afsei Aretz. It became a place that the entire world was obsessed with. Sound familiar? I was just in the old city for Shabbos, and I was walking around, and one of the tour guides was telling me how in the 1860s or something, when the Turks finally made peace with the Russians or something over Israel, every single European country opened up their consulate in Israel. A missionary, a hospital, the Swiss place, and everyone wanted to have their placement because. So the struggle of Yerushalayim puts a Jew into a very, very difficult position. Because on the one hand, we want people to be drawn to Yerushalayim. On the other hand, we want to accomplish that by establishing our presence in Yerushalayim and in Eretz Yisrael, and hopefully yielding a world of harmonious recognition. And there's so much hatred directed against Israel. The easiest response is just to dismiss it and to reject it and to defy it. But these are the people that we one day want to broadcast to. These are not our enemies. These are the people that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to care about. So right now, we're not yet zocha for these two agendas to be reconcilable. But in your heart, you can't see them as conflicting. One day, everyone will gather in Yerushalayim, Harnino Goyim Amo. Everyone will sing to the Jewish people. Why? Who could finish the pasuk? Harnino Goyim Amo. Kidam Avadav Yikom. People will celebrate the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took vengeance upon his enemies and elevated the Jewish people into the legitimate. We're not yet at that madrega. And for us, the question in Eretz Yisrael is, how do we maneuver and how do we manipulate between the two? And it's not just a strategic question that we need American support, American financing, and world support, but also because our agenda as Am Yisrael, and our deed and our warrant to be in Eretz Yisrael is to be a model for other nations, and to, our desire to act within legitimate expectations of civility and to create an army of morality is not just practical and not just morals, because our whole purpose for being in Eretz Yisrael is to broadcast, as people say, the Or Lagoyim message of how a nation should be built. And if we abdicate that, then we lose our license to Eretz Yisrael. So how do we balance and how do we modulate between those two? That's what's happening in Chaya. Everyone's happy that the Jews have changed society. They're not so happy that we want to live in Eretz Yisrael, and even less happy that we want to live in Yerushalayim. 1947, no one whispered. Jews returning to Eretz Yisrael, to Haifa, to Tel Aviv. Everyone was all too gracious and all too eager. First of all, it calmed down their guilt after the Holocaust. But when Jews come to Yerushalayim, it's a whole different story. History has returned. The very interesting Gemara in Brachos. Gemara in Brachos says that there's a machlokas how to conclude the third bracha of benching. According to one daya, Bona Yerushalayim Amen, which is how we paskin. According to the other day, I think it's Rabbi Yehuda, Baruch Atah Hashem Moshia Yisrael. It's a whole different lashon. So the Gemara asks, this is the language of the Gemara in Brachos, Moshia Yisrael in Bona Yerushalayim Lo? That's how you make a bracha, Yeshuas Yisrael, without mentioning Yerushalayim? It's impossible. The notion of Yeshuas Yisrael without Yerushalayim is unacceptable. There's no way that a Tana would have a shita that the bracha should add Moshia Yisrael. Moshia Yisrael in Bona Yerushalayim Lo? And one says, no. What I said, Marian says, Moshia Yisrael u Bona Yerushalayim. You shouldn't just say Bonei Bracha of Yerushalayim, but Bonei Bracha of Yerushalayim or Moshia Yisrael, or the reverse. So that's why our holding Yerushalayim has to be. Anyone, I'm sure those of you who one day will study for Smicha, Mirz Hashem, will come across a sefer called Sefer Mi'iras Einayim. Anyone know what we call that sefer in Choshen Mishpat, Sefer Mi'iras Einayim? It's called the Sma. Beautiful sefer in Choshen Mishpat. Probably the most famous Sma is the one on Kinyan Kesef, right? The Sma, right? They're like Kedushin now. So there's a famous Masara from the Sma. Evidently, there were Jews who were exiled to Bavel. During Galus Bavel, most of the Jews were exiled to Bavel, to Persia, to Iran. But evidently, there were Jews who were exiled to Germany. We have records of Jews first Beis HaMikdash. This is 500 BC to Germany. And Ezra writes letters to all the Jews to come back and return to Eretz Yisrael. And evidently, the Jews of Germany wrote a letter, this is what the Shema writes, wrote a letter back to Ezra, telling Ezra, you go back to Yerushalayim, and we'll stay here in Germany, Yerushalayim HaKtana, because we've been so warmly embraced. The Shema says something, you've heard this before?
Yeah.
The Shema says something terrifying. The Shema says because of that letter, German Jews were always fated to disproportionate suffering. Because it's one thing not to return to Yerushalayim, a totally different thing to use the word Yerushalayim about any place other than Yerushalayim. Crusades, Holocaust, I would never say that. No one would ever say that if not for the Masar of the Shema. There's a very cute letter I saw about Rabbeinu Meir Simcha of Dvinsk. You know Rabbeinu Meir Simcha of Dvinsk? The Meshech Chachma, Meir Simcha Chachma, Meir Simcha HaKohen, Chaf, about the Yar Sameach, about the Meshech Chachma. So he was a rabbi in the great city of Dvinsk. And around the turn of the previous century, the community of Yerushalayim invited him to try out to be the rabbi in Yerushalayim from Dvinsk. The community of Dvinsk found out about this, and they were appalled. They wrote a letter to Yerushalayim, and the letter more or less reads as follows. What are you thinking? They were writing to people. Why would anyone in his right mind want to leave the city of Dvinsk, where there are 50,000 Jews, for 300 Jews living, or how many Jews lived in Yerushalayim in 1900, 2,000, 3,000? How dare you? It's like asking Rabbi Korupkin to go out to Saskatchewan, or why would anyone do that? It's crazy. And where's Dvinsk today? And where's Yerushalayim today? So every time I read that letter, I start chuckling. They're appalled. Why would anyone in his right mind leave Dvinsk to go to Yerushalayim? So it's important to be able to see the events in prophetic and ideological terms to remind us that this isn't just a political skirmish, and this isn't just an intifada. This is part of Tanakh. I was at Mrs. Hankins' house, being Menachem Avel, a couple of weeks ago, and some girls walked into the room. One of the girls' programs, Eshel, Mechinat Eshel or something. There's a Sephardi, like Sephardi girls, Persian girls. One of the programs for girls. So they brought in 20 girls to sit down. The girls obviously didn't know where they're just there for the experience of the mitzvah. So Chana Hankins started to make small talk, not small talk, but started to talk to them to make them feel comfortable. So she asked the girls, how many Sfarim are there in Tanakh? So I have to say, it took the girls a couple tries to get the answer. Finally, one of the girls came up and said, 24 Sfarim of Tanakh. So Chana said, well, there's a 25th Sefer. And Hashem is writing it right now. And it's about us. It's about us trying to come back to Eretz Yisrael. And we're all part of that Sefer. And my children are part of that Sefer. And I thought those were very powerful words to remind us that this is Tanakh. We're living through HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Nevuos. It's hard to know exactly. It's not like we can trace exact Nevuos to exact details. It's hard to know. But to a degree, so to speak, when it surrounds Yerushalayim, it almost is consoling to us to know this isn't just the terror incident. This is Yerushalayim, and this is an Nevuah of Zechariah Yerdalet and Yecheskel Mem Zayit. Reminds me a lot of the story of Hananiah ben Trajan when he was being burned in Saragin Malchus, and his daughter was talking to him, and at a certain point his daughter asks her father, aren't you sad that a Sefer Torah is being burnt with you? And Hananiah ben Trajan says, whoever will take Nekama for the Sefer Torah will take Nekama for my death. Which in our jargon would mean, now we've won the fight. Once you drag the Sefer Torah into the ring, now it's a whole different story. If you're just attacking me, that's one thing. Now that you're attacking HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sefer Torah, so now that they're attacking Yerushalayim, again, we're not happy that it's happening. We don't trivialize the suffering. Human beings, it's always very, very dangerous to become too ideological about human suffering. You have to be very, very careful. On the one hand, there's real suffering. On the other hand, you can't lose sight of the broader picture. I'll just end, because I know it's getting late, to the story about 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I was driving in the Gush, and I pulled into Kfar Etzion, And they put up a stop sign right at the entrance to Kfar Etzion. That's where the Makar Chaim High School is. My son goes to Makar Chaim, so I was going to visit him. And I was behind the bus, and the bus pulled forward, and I pulled forward, and all of a sudden the traffic cop signals me over. I had stopped, but I'd stopped behind the bus, and when the bus went, I didn't stop again after the bus. But it's like there's no traffic there. There's no cars there. So he pulls me over, and I get in and say, I stopped. Didn't you see that I stopped? He barked at me. He said, "Kach אתה מדבר לשוטר?" He started screaming at me. I spoke very civilly. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't insulting to him. He evidently was having a hard day. And then we had a little conversation about it. I went like this, like that. He says, "Kacha," and he was like really berating me. So I realized what was happening. He wasn't going to release me from this ticket. Anything I would say would just further agitate him. So I kept quiet. I sat there in my car. Kaparas, we said, okay, this is going down. I'm going to spend the 250 shekel. It's happening. Okay. 45 minutes later, and it was boiling hot. He took a really long time to fill out the ticket. If you ever got a ticket in Eretz Yisrael, it's basically Megillas Esther. Perek Aleph, Perek Beis, Perek Gimel. And it's a combination of Megillas Esther and a Shtar Ksuva, because you actually have to sign it. They call you over and you have to sign it. So the only thing missing is a chalipa. So, it's a whole production. Okay, I signed the Ksuva. Give it to me. And then, as he was leaving, and then, of course, all the hostility, it wasn't really hostility, it was a one-way hostility, because it was really very sweet to him, but all the anger has subsided, because I signed the ticket. I said, I just want to let you know, I really stopped, but I want to thank you for all that you're doing to protect us, and to protect our people. And he laughed, like he almost gave me a hug, because, the broader picture. The broader picture is, Baruch Hashem, we have our police force. And Baruch Hashem, the stabbings are not a strategic threat. Over the summer, so 2 summers ago, during the kidnapping, so the Satmar Rebbe came out with his infamous statement that it was the fault of the 3 parents for the death of the 3 children because they had placed their children in danger, in harm's way, by sending them to the Gush for education. So there was an outrage on the internet. People were absolutely, like I said, morally outraged, theologically disappointed. Eretz Yisrael, how could you be so insensitive? So I had very little to add to that debate because people had already made the appropriate points. But there's one point I wanted to make. So I titled my share, I put out a recording called "Why I Agree with the Satmar Rebbe." So that got about 3,000 hits. Why is a Zionist rabbi agreeing with the Satmar Rebbe? And what I did is I crunched some numbers. I got hold of the tables of vehicular and crime-related deaths in Monroe County, where the Satmars live. How many people died during the month of, I think it was August, based on vehicular accidents and crime-related, and terror was obviously no terror in Monroe County. And I crunched those numbers alongside how many people died in Gush Etzion of vehicular death, of crime, and terror. And the statistics were completely skewed. Namely, it was far safer to walk down the street in Gush Etzion in August 2014 than it was in terms of pure statistics. Raw statistics, you were much safer. What's the difference? Crime is random, vehicular accidents are random. But statistically, you're in far greater danger walking across Bathurst Avenue than walking down the street in Gush Etzion. So I said, I agree with you. You should send your children to the safest place possible, which would mean sending them to Gush Etzion for education. Terror is psychological, and we need to face it with a strong sense of purpose and a strong sense of, and even the stabbings. I mean, we don't have buses blowing up, and we don't. What Rabbi would always tell us during the heart of the Intifada, and I lived through 2 Intifadas with my Rosh Yeshivas. I lived through the first one, and the second one. He would tell us what suffering really was. Evidently, in the months leading up to the declaration of the State of Israel, there were terrible, terrible bombings. There was a fridge full of explosives that went off in Kikar Tzion. 80 people were killed, and obviously in Gush Etzion, 250 people were killed. So, Baruch Hashem, not to, on the one hand, trivialize or diminish the suffering. On the other hand, keep a sense of perspective, keep a sense of, remember a couple of years ago during the fire up north, remember when that bus full of policemen or prison guards who would come, we were talking to someone in Yerushalayim, an old man, and he was crying, his eyes were red, he was crying, he says, how could it happen? How could 250 of our policemen die. How could, just like crying in tears. And then he looked at me and he said, I'll never forget this. He said, but at least it was our police force. At least it was our police force. It was our. And that's the reality of living in Eretz Yisrael, especially in our camp, where we have to have a police force, we have to have a navy, we have to have a fire department, and Ashreinu shezachinu l'kach, Ashreinu that I got a ticket from, an angry Israeli police officer, rather than a drunk Russian Cossack who wouldn't have smiled after he gave me the ticket, but probably would have followed me home and raped my sister, or plundered my home, or beat up my brother or something, just for the fun of it. And at least this was my brother, and human beings have short tempers, and whatever, he lost his temper for whatever reason. So, if anything, it's a time just to appreciate what we have in Eretz Yisrael, and that we're in Yerushalayim, and that, so to speak, the desire of the entire world to be in Yerushalayim is built into the fabric of history. They're not fighting over Petach Tikva, they're not fighting over Toronto, for good reason. They're fighting over Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, the Shara Shemayim. And B'rut Hashem, we should have simcha, le'artzecha v'sasa li'recha. A lot of us around this table are sitting here together. Not everyone. I apologize to those who aren't part of this experience, but who are sitting together at a table for the first time since our Rabbi passed, and someone who made a deep and indelible imprint on our lives. And it's, on the one hand, it's a difficult period. I feel like I'm going through a year of grieving and of mourning. I remember walking over to Tova Lichtenstein after Yom Kippur, and we looked at each other in the eyes, and we just started breaking down crying, and what hit you, at what point it hit you. But on the other hand, especially since it wasn't traumatic with Lichtenstein's P'tira in the sense that it was unexpected, or a young person who was obviously failing health, but it's a chance to get a retrospective and just to appreciate the great matana that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, and everyone here who had that gift, and who is Baruch Hashem earning that gift and giving it on to others, some in official capacity, some in other capacities, some Talmidim, some Talmidim, everyone here at this table, I imagine, was ultimately deeply impacted. That's the difference between a Gadol and a Rebbe. So I've been zocheh to be a Rebbe for close to 30 years almost. And I hope that I've had Talmidim who will enjoy my Torah, inspired by my Torah, and will be raising their family more or less on the values that I imparted to them. But I don't imagine that children of my Talmidim will then raise their families, based on my Torah or whatever. But a Gadol of Rav Lichtenstein's caliber, it doesn't just affect one generation, but Talmidim, that's a Gadol. So even people who didn't learn by Rav Lichtenstein, or now the generation of Talmidim that are coming up, that are learning from Miss Talmidim, they're going to be Talmidim, and then raise their children, their families, their kehillah. So when I think of that line, Talmidei, now we're at that stage where no one will no longer have the schus to be his Talmud, but now we have people that are able to grab onto his Talmidim and become Talmidei and spread his Torah.